Good afternoon everyone, my name is Lewis, welcome back to the channel. I hope I find you all in good health. Today I'm going to be talking about some of the albums I've been listening to recently. I'm going to talk briefly about each album in turn and why I would recommend them. So let's start at the beginning. The first album today is a 1974 soundtrack release by a gentleman called David Shire. And the album, sorry about the glare, is called The Taking of Pelham 123. This is a stonking album, and I think in its genre, the only one that comes close to it, in my opinion, is Lalo Schifrin's Bullet soundtrack of 1968. I'm not sure which one I like better out of the two, but I very much enjoy this album. This is definitely one of the coolest soundtracks out there. It's an exciting score. It's littered full of explosive horn sections and like fast-paced percussion tunes. Unfortunately, due to the nature of the time in which this was made, there's no credits for the musicians who took part on this album, and if I could have highlighted a few of them, I would have, and that's a real shame, because they definitely did a good job on this particular album. The tracks, however, that I would recommend on this album are Mini Manhunt. Don't be surprised if you actually know that tune. You just didn't know what it was called. It has appeared in several commercials, that sort of thing, so you may well know it. End Titles and Money Montage. So have a listen to it on one of the streaming sites. This particular copy of the album was a reissue by Simply Vinyl, and it came out about 10 years ago. I would have thought it would be quite easy to still get this album, certainly on CD. But have a listen first, see if you like it, and I would say have a listen to the Bullet soundtrack as well from '68, and make up your mind as to which one you think is better. So that's the first album. The second album today is a 1977 release, and it's by Ronnie Laws, and the album is called Friends and Strangers. It's a jazz fusion album, and it's produced by Wayne Henderson. That may not mean anything to you now, but on your musical journey, particularly in the jazz and jazz fusion end of things, he's a name which will come up quite frequently. I would say that this particular album is on the lighter side of jazz and jazz fusion, perhaps better described as a forerunner to the commercial jazz of the 1980s, and that particular sound, and that was probably the main acts of that era who were producing that type of sound were Kenny G and a gentleman called Neji. This is better than both their outputs, but it's of that kind of sound, and it's certainly, yeah, as I said, it's a precursor to it all. This is an interesting album to me, in the sense of, when I first heard it, I thought this was the mustard. I thought it was the bee's knees. I really rated it highly. But as my musical taste has, grown and matured, this has slid down my rankings of all-time albums, and it's unfortunate because it's not rubbish by any stretch of the imagination. It's just maybe that my tastes have become slightly more sophisticated. But this is certainly, as a gateway into the jazz and jazz fusion sound, this is a really good gateway. So I don't want to belittle it by any stretch of the imagination. But in terms of where I am in terms of my musical journey, this has definitely slid down the totem pole. Yeah, but yeah, for nostalgic reasons, I'm still going to keep it around. I still love it to a certain extent. But would I say to modern ears, has this really aged well? I have to think about that. I would say, overall, I would say this is a competent album, but perhaps lacks some passion. Um, as a side issue, as a side note, um, Ronnie Laws comes from an extremely talented family. Um, two of his sisters are singers, backing singers of note, and he has a multi-instrument talented kind of brother as well, older brother called Hubert Laws, who does a more experimental jazz. I think I prefer the output of Hubert. Hubert's a bit hit and miss, but when he is good, he is very, very good. This album is one of the better albums of Ronnie, but I feel it's a bit safe. He didn't really stretch himself, but he is he's a musician of note. He's appeared on loads of albums, countless number of albums. So, in by no stretch of the imagination is he rubbish or anything close to that. I just think he could have done a bit better on this album, but maybe it was out of his control. I'm not sure. The three tracks that I would recommend from this album would be Friends and Strangers, the title track, um, Nothing About Nothing. I really think everyone should have a listen to that track. It's so much fun, that particular one. You will find yourself shoulder shuffling and toe tapping with that particular one. And Good Time Ride. But there are at least another two tracks on here of merit. So don't dismiss this album. This is just to do with my personal journey and where I think it fits in my pantheon of albums. So, as a gateway album into the jazz and jazz fusion world, this is a really good start, this particular one. So, it's not going to leave my collection ever. I'm going to keep it. It's just slid down the totem pole. So, the third album today is from my Brazilian side of the collection. It's a 1976 recording, and it was a lost album for many years, but was released in 2009 on the Far Out Recordings label. And this is an album by Joyce, and it's called Visions of Dawn. This is Joyce Moreno. Oh, she's an accomplished singer. She's been around for ages on the Brazilian bossa nova scene. This probably represents new bossa, whatever that means, but it's the more modern bossa nova sound. I think you guys are in for a treat with this particular album. Do have a listen to it as soon as possible. She's accompanied on this album by two gentlemen. One is called Nana Vasconcelos and Mauricio Maestro. Yeah, they do a really good job on here. They really do. Their production value, their ear for musicality certainly adds to Miss Joyce's particular musical talent. Now, in my opinion, Joyce has a light and introverted lullaby style of vocal projection. She's not one of those vocalists who go, "Oh, look at me, look at me." No, she's far more reserved than that. But don't let that take away from your enjoyment. As I said at the beginning, hopefully, when you do hear this, I believe you're going to be in for an absolute treat. Even if you don't know anything about bossa nova or the Brazilian jazz sound in any way, shape, or form, you can listen to this. Again, it's a gateway album, but don't let that, don't let that fool you into thinking that it's simple or anything like that. No, this is an accomplished album. It's just super nice. It's lush. In my mind, at least, it invokes visions of barely populated Brazilian coastal villages. How about that? Have a listen. See if you think my description of the album is accurate. I'd like to hear your opinion. The three tracks that I would recommend from this album would be Metralhadera, that's one word, Tudo Bonito, and Banana. So, you know what, I'm quite jealous of if you're going to be hearing this album for the first time. You're in for a treat with this one. Should be able to get this one easy on CD. Vinyl may be a bit more problematic. but certainly on the streaming sites this should be fully available, so have a listen to those 3 tracks, see what you think, but I wouldn't be surprised if you put in an order for this almost immediately on hearing it. The 4th album today puts a particular smile on my face because it's one of my holy grails, and probably since the age of 14 or 15, when I heard one of the singles or one of the tracks from this album, I knew that this was the way forward, that I was going to be collecting records from that point onwards, and I always wanted this album. It was, when I'd first heard of it, it was ridiculous amounts of money for it. So I'm super glad when it was reissued in the last, I think, 5 to 8 years, and as soon as I saw it, I had to have it. Now, it's a 1982 self-titled album by, and I have to salute him, by one of my favourite artists out there on a personal level, Mr. Don Blackman. Sorry about the glare. Now, yeah, as you can see from the cover, it's of a certain time, and it was a time where you could have cornrows in your hair and you can accessorize with seashells. Yeah, that was a thing. It was. Right, as I said, it's one of my holy grails. This is a jazz funk 2-step extravaganza. Those who already know about this gentleman, they will agree with what I'm saying. If you've only seen him for the first time now, get to know him. He's up there. Yeah, maybe I'm biased for nostalgic reasons, but I don't think so. This is summer party vibes at their best. It's cheerful, it's energetic. It's what classic R&B should be. Of note on this album are the following musicians: on bass, a Barry Johnson or Son John. I don't know why it's not Sinjin, but it's Son John. And on drums, Dennis Chambers, otherwise known as Washington. They do a really good job, and again, like I said earlier, with like the inadvertent toe tapping, that's going to happen to you with this album. It's, if you don't feel lifted by this album, I'd be super surprised. The tracks that I would recommend from this album are Never Miss a Thing, Heart's Desire, and Since You've Been Away So Long. So there's a bit of 2-step in there, and there's 2 upfront jazz funky tunes. And even me just thinking about, let me just put it this way, again, I'm going to be jealous that you'd be listening to this for the first time. Yeah, this is superb. This is where it's at. So good for you. Give it a listen. Let me know if you agree with me. If you end up thinking, oh, I don't know what he's talking about, yeah, I'd want to have a conversation with you. But there you go. And my last album today is a jazz album, and it's a 1977 release, and it's by a gentleman called Julian Priester and his band, the Marine Intrusion, and the album is called Polarization. If you're going to do abstract cover, do it like that. That's really, really nice. As a side issue, hold on just a second. I just want to just go over something. Now, this is a horrible album cover. Why has it got a front end of a motorcycle on it? I don't get why they've done that. It has nothing to do with the album at all. That's abstraction for abstraction's sake, and it doesn't work. This is where it works. That's when you do it properly, when your art director knows what they're doing. So, to continue, yeah, I'm biased towards, in the jazz field, the saxophone-led bands and performers. I've always been a bit suspicious of bands who, the lead instrument is something else, other than a saxophone. But I'm super glad I went with this one, because this one is trombone led. Yes, trombone led. Yeah, I don't regret it for a second. This is really, really clever album. Um, it has a trick within the tracks themselves of each track noticeably expanding and contracting. And I'm not going to explain it to you at this point. I want you to listen to it and you'll understand what I mean once you've gone through this album. There are hints of melancholia on this particular album, but don't let that put you off. It's not overboard, and there is an ongoing theme to it, so it's not overdone. It's not being sad for sad's sake, and I wouldn't say that's the complete flavour of the album, because it certainly isn't. In terms of musician mentions, I would say probably the standout artist apart from Mr. Priester would be Hashima Mark Williams on bass. He is absolutely phenomenal. Gee whiz, he's that good. Surprisingly, the better tracks on this album, which showcase the trombone as an instrument and what it can do in a jazz context, those compositions weren't actually written by Mr. Priester himself. And I thought that was really interesting that in order to hear the best of him, somebody else had to write the piece instead. Yeah, I thought that was noteworthy. Um, this is an awesome piece. Um, it's not top tier, I wouldn't say that. This is a mid-ranking album. It's not overly difficult, but you have to, shape your mind. You have to know what you're getting into when you're going to commit to this one. Don't let yourself be overawed by it, because it does take its time to gather momentum, but it's well worth being patient with it. It's really, really rewarding piece of jazz, this particular one. So the tracks that I would recommend from this album are Polarization, Coincidence, and Scorpio Blue. Yeah, again, I can't reiterate enough. Give this one a chance via one of the streaming services. You may be surprised at how good it is. To find this on vinyl, you're probably going to struggle, or you're going to have to pay. It could be expensive. I have fortunately enough bought it as a repress and got it at a good price. You may struggle to get it, certainly on vinyl, for a reasonable price. CDs, I'm not even sure that there's a lot of those either. So for today, that's my last album. I would like to thank you for your time at this point and sharing this journey with me. If you've enjoyed the content, please consider subscribing and liking, and feel free to comment down below if you've got any questions for me or observations. Once again, thank you for sharing this time with me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I want you to look after yourselves, and I will see you in the next episode. So until then, bye bye.